What's a scary science fact that the public knows nothing about? Story 1. If your dog swims in a lake after receiving a spot on flea treatment, it absolutely decimates the invertebrate population. A large dog swimming in 8 Olympic swimming pools worth of water soon after treatment will leach enough neurotoxin to kill 50% of the lake's invertebrate population within 48 hours. I say after, I mean relatively soon after, within say a day, to have an effect quite this devastating. The leaching does reduce over the month, but it's still there, and the effect of multiple dogs still allows for a terrible buildup of chemicals. Story 2. Another Carrington event. The original Carrington event was in 1859, which was basically an intense geomagnetic storm that knocked out telegrams because that's all the technology there was to disrupt back then. Nowadays, we use electricity for virtually everything. If it hits now, the effect would be like an EMP, but globally, there'd be no functional technology that involved electrics. In essence, losing all electricity would, in turn, stop communications, then logistics, and then fundamental infrastructure like food distribution, healthcare, and utilities, other than electricity. Story 3. The German Nazi army consumed massive amounts of Pervitin, a brand name for literal meth, and the company producing Pervitin made the pills till the 1980s, and the army used Pervitin for drills till then. The Nazis also put Pervitin in chocolates, calling it Hausfrauenschokolade, to ease the dreaded life of a stay-at-home mother, and so on. Eastern Germany still has a huge meth problem, which is a whole lot less surprising knowing that it has been produced there legally up until fairly recently. Story 4, approximately 60%, in some reports, of the world's population have the parasite Toxoplasma gondii in their brain. For a long time, it's thought to have been a benign presence, but recent statistical research shows that it may have an impact on things like levels of anger and rates of accidents and suicide. When gondii is on rats, it changes their behavior, so that they find the smell of cat urine sexually appealing. So they find cats and get eaten. In the gut of the cat, the parasite can reproduce. Story 5. The human body temperature in developed countries is actually declining, and at the same time, global warming is increasing the temperature thresholds for many fungus types. This is leading to a whole new medical issue of fungus infecting humans, and its main source of protection, body temperature, is no longer working. That body temperature is a large reason for the success of mammals all over the world. After the KT extinction, the sun was blocked and cold-blooded species couldn't raise their body temperature to kill off infections in their bodies. There is ample evidence that after KT, that fungus spread all over the world in massive quantities, which leads many to believe this led to the ascendancy of mammals on Earth. Story 6. The youngest persons who developed Alzheimer's were around 25 years old. One lady got diagnosed with it at 31 while pregnant. By the way, when you get the disease at like 65, it doesn't suddenly begin. It has been creeping up and ravaging your brain for at least 20 years, if not more. You just didn't realize it because our brain is very good at compensating damages until it cannot. Basically, the day you lose yourself in the supermarket, it's too late. Your brain is mostly mush, and there is so far nothing you can do. That means that if you are 40 to 60 years old and reading this, chances are that some of you already started to experience the onset of Alzheimer's brain degeneration. It's just not advanced enough for you to realize it. Story 7. There are weaponized strains of anthrax, which can remain viable and dangerous for 40+ years after release. In 1942, the UK tested an anthrax bomb on Gruinar Island, killing a flock of sheep in days. Some died in hours. Examination showed that the spores could remain active for decades, and decontamination proved impossible at the time. The project was scrapped. Fast forward to 1981, an eco-terrorist group smuggled a sample off of the island and threatened the UK government with releasing it if the island wasn't decontaminated. The spores were still active and deadly. It took 4 years to plan and execute the cleanup, using 280 tons of formaldehyde in a seawater solution, and removing 7 hectares worth of soil to a depth of 3 feet, about 58,000 tons of topsoil, where the concentration was too high for the juice to do the job. The island was confirmed clean in 1990, 4 years after cleanup began. Story 8. All onions, all veggies in the allium family are toxic to dogs. Worst case scenario then can develop AIHA, autoimmune hemolytic anemia, whereas the body destroys its own red blood cells. This disease is about 80% fatal. My dog caught it. We're not sure from where, but it was a primary disease, not a result of cancer. We think he was eating leeks out of the garden. Took a week in the hospital, 2 blood transfusions, and about 6 months of meds to get him back. He started at 45 pounds and was down to 19 pounds at the worst part of it. Story 9. Reverting global warming does not unmelt the South Pole. Antarctica is a giant ice mountain. the size of the US and Canada, average 1 kilometer thick, on top of land that is studded by plates of ice in the sea. Think of a very slow-moving pudding held in place by a little edge. All the modeling suggests that once you lose those plates, eventually all the ice will slide into the water. To refreeze the plates once they are gone, you need an ice age of about -2 degrees Celsius to pre-industrial or -3 degrees Celsius to current. There is a 70 meters sea level rise of ice on the South Pole. The models swing widely on how long it takes to melt on a bunch of factors, but it could be less than 2 centuries for the first 10 meters. So either we geoengineer to cool at least the South Pole by a tremendous amount, or to hold the ice in place, or in time all coastal regions are lost. The plates are still in place, but the warmest one is showing signs of stress and thinning. It is linked to 7 meters of sea level rise if it fails. To me, this is more threatening than any other climate change catastrophe. Story 10. You can die from a brain aneurysm with zero warning. You can be perfectly healthy, get a headache, and be dead before you reach the emergency room. Also broken arrow nuclear incidents, especially the 6 nuclear weapons the US military just lost and never found. Bonus, only scary because people don't know it. If someone is having a severe allergic reaction, an EpiPen alone will not save them. It's only supposed to open their airways long enough to get them to a hospital. Similarly, don't restrain someone having a seizure or try to shove something in their mouth. Call an ambulance. Story 11. ACME, coronal mass ejection, is the most likely civilization-ending disaster to come from space. The sun emits them regularly, and they hit the Earth every few hundred years. The last one occurred in the 1890s. But society at the time was less susceptible to the effects. Were one to hit the Earth today, it would basically destroy all the tech infrastructure on whichever side of the planet is facing the sun at the time. This would knock the affected hemisphere back into the stupid ages, and it would take decades to recover, altering the global balance of power forever. It's only a matter of time. We could mitigate the effects, but it would be expensive, so we haven't, and likely never will. At least not until the problem becomes real to people. By then, it will be too late. This is a much more likely scenario than an asteroid impact. Story 12, airplanes are dynamically stable, but helicopters are dynamically unstable. That means if an airplane pilot lets go of the controls of a small plane with no autopilot, if it's correctly trimmed and balanced, it will keep flying level until it runs out of fuel. If a helicopter pilot lets go of the controls in about 2.4 seconds, it will tip over to such a degree that it is unrecoverable. We can let go of one control, the collective, for a little while by frictioning it in place to change the radio, adjust something, scratch our nose or whatever. But it's friction on, do the thing with the left hand, friction off, and hand back on the collective. We fly 3 seconds away from falling out of the sky all the time. But then, that's also kind of the same for bicycles, although they can only tip left and right, not every direction. Subconsciously, you are always adjusting your weight and controlling the steering to stay upright. Same thing in a helicopter. You balance on a column of air, and you keep balancing the whole time, just like on a bike. You don't even notice, you just do it.